Okay, we're looking today at connections between photography and pop art. Pop art was filled with photography and the use of photography as a medium and other mediums like painting and silk screening. They were all completely intermeshed with each other. And so this is a time when we're not looking at photography as a very strictly defined medium. It gets beyond the boundaries of the medium. So when we're talking about pop art, as the name would suggest, pop art was all about popular culture. It's a movement that aims to embrace popular culture as subject material and really engage with it very directly. Arises in the 1950s, and commodity culture had been dismissed as low culture and kitsch, meaning cheap and easy, by the fine art culture of the 1950s. So pop art aims to break down the barriers between mainstream commodity culture and the world of fine art. It's a visual style that is playful and energetic, and it's sometimes ironic. And sometimes it's hard to tell exactly where the artist stands, whether they're celebrating popular culture and consumer culture or whether they're implying a criticism of it. A lot of it is left to the viewer to sort of sort out their own feelings. So in the origins of this movement at that time, photography was used more for a mass culture medium than for a fine art medium. It had a conflicted relationship with what is considered art up until this time. And this is a time when the two sides start to look a lot alike. Meanwhile, in England, there was a movement called pop art in England. They were starting to call this kind of art pop art in England. And this is a style of art where they're using collage, and we can refer to this as photo montage because there's so much photography material in there. They're using this visual style to very playfully and satirically look at the hyper commercialized world around them as the primary subject material of their art. So this is Richard Hamilton's "Just What Is It That Makes Today's Home So Different, So Appealing." This is from 1956, and it's collaged together from scraps from magazines and comic books and such. So this is happening in England, and very quickly starts to influence art that's made in the United States. Roy Lichtenstein is one of the best known pop artists. His particular visual style, which was very popular from the mid 1960s right up to the present day, his style is best known for using comic books as visual reference material and the source of his imagery. He would use stencils and a form of paint that has a very, very flat surface, so you don't see any brush strokes in his finished paintings. And the imagery and the kinds of stories that are told in his paintings again come directly from very popular, mainstream, very light subject material. So what you see in this detail, you see a little bit of his visual style. Look at the dotted pattern. That's called a Ben-Day dot pattern, and it's what you would get if you just took a sort of a macro photograph, a sort of very, very close-up photograph of a comic book page and just blew it up super, super big. That's the kind of dot matrix pattern that you would get with this popular, very, very cheap method of printing that was done for comic books from the 1960s until very recently. Now, Roy Lichtenstein would use this visual style, this sort of dot style, and he turned it to all kinds of subject material. His comic book pictures were the most popular, but he also used this visual style to sort of visually reinterpret themes from the history of art. And these are images from a series that he's lifting from Monet. Monet, the Impressionist, painted Rouen Cathedral many, many times in different kinds of light. As an Impressionist, that was what Monet was especially interested in, the effects of light. Where Lichtenstein uses different combinations of color, not to mimic the effects of light, but to just put different playful combinations of color together. So let's talk about Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was born and raised in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. He went to college at what was then called Carnegie Tech and is now Carnegie Mellon University. showed talent as an artist from a very young age, moved to New York City and had his professional career based there, but he is buried here in the Pittsburgh area. And his museum, the Andy Warhol Museum, showcases rotating collections of his work and contemporary exhibitions that show his influence on the art world. So after college, he settled in New York City and very quickly became a very successful commercial artist. These images show you examples of the visual style that he was known for, with these blotted black ink lines, line drawings, and that are filled in with vivid colors of ink. So for fashion illustration and advertising imagery, he was a very sought after commercial artist. Nonetheless, what he really wanted was to be taken seriously as a fine artist and to exhibit in museums and to be shown in galleries like his friends Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, who he felt like never took his work seriously. Warhol's first gallery exhibition was his Campbell soup cans, and these were shown all together in 1962 in Los Angeles. It was a popular show in Los Angeles. It created a whole lot of discussion and talk, and everybody wanted to see it, and everybody had opinions on it, and led Warhol very quickly to gallery representation in New York City. Unfortunately for us, the Campbell soup cans have been kept together as a collection, and you can see them at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. As you can see, they are pictures of Campbell soup cans. And this is what the cans looked like at the time. They weren't using photography on the label. This is really what they looked like. They reflect Andy Warhol's interest in the things that you can buy in everyday mainstream culture as something that is worth paying attention to as an artist. So when Warhol became popular as an artist, everybody wanted to see, these sort of pictures of him in magazines shopping for Campbell Soup Can and so forth. The world of the grocery store was actually very interesting to him, both for its cultural function and its aesthetic function. He was interested in the sort of repetition and the mechanical production of what looks like the same thing over and over and over and over again. He found this sort of aesthetically intriguing and satisfying, and culturally, he said about things that you can get in the grocery store. He said actually specifically about the Coca-Cola bottle that it's the same for everybody, and it doesn't matter who you are, whether you are the president of the United States or the janitor that sweeps the floor. When you buy this commercial thing off of the shelf, everybody gets the same thing, and it's a sort of cultural equalizer. He didn't say it was a cultural equalizer. He just liked that everybody was getting the same thing. Andy Warhol was in Los Angeles on the occasion of the exhibition of the Campbell soup cans when Marilyn Monroe passed away. It was a huge cultural event when she passed away. In the world of pop stardom was kind of a new thing in culture in 1962. People were still kind of getting used to the idea that a star could be so big that everybody could care when somebody this famous would die. It was a huge cultural event, and Andy Warhol immediately started work on a series of paintings that were about Marilyn Monroe. So what you see in this pairing of images, it's the same image over and over and over again. On the left, you see it as a black and white silk screen, and it's sort of smudged and smeary as if it's coming off of a newspaper press. And on the right, you see it colored in bright and vivid and sort of larger than life. Andy Warhol's method for making these kinds of paintings was to take a photograph that already existed in culture. He also used his own Polaroids, but that came a little bit later. At this point, he was using photographs that were already out there. He would get the pictures from the actual movie studios. They were photos that were used to promote movies. So he's got a production still for a promotional still for one of Marilyn Monroe's movies, and he sends it to a sign production shop to have a negative transparency made from that photograph. And you can see the crop lines on the original photograph. So once that negative transparency is made, he takes it into his own studio, makes silk screens so that he can screen print the black and white part onto a canvas. So that part is hand silk screened onto the canvas, either by Warhol himself or later by one of his assistants. And then all of these broad areas of color he would use as a stencil to sort of guide the painting in of the broad areas of color. And then the black would go on last, actually. The colors would go on first and then the black. Many different color combinations were put together for the Marilyn painting, some of them more naturalistic than others. This is about as naturalistic as they got, but you can see it's not super naturalistic. But that's Warhol's pop art style. This is the style that he became just celebrated for in 1962, and he ran with it for the rest of his career. Now, one of the paintings that came from this series that you see on the left is called the Gold Marilyn Monroe. So he made this painting relatively large in scale. It's 6 feet tall, so this is a big canvas. The face is right in the middle, and the background is all painted in with metallic gold. This makes a sort of a reference to the church that Warhol attended when he was growing up. It was St. John Chrysostom's Byzantine Rite Catholic Church. So while he was in church when he was a child, he would spend a lot of time looking at the wall of icons. And this is generally understood to have been an influence on his sort of flattened approach to paintings as an adult artist, although it wasn't something that he really talked about as an artist. It's something that people sort of put together when they were, putting his biographies together later. But to call Marilyn Monroe an icon has multiple levels of significance. And I think what Warhol was most interested in was her status as a cultural icon. The fact that she was a human being, but the media, the movies and television and the tabloid newspapers made her a star, made her something larger than life, and people loved that persona. And that persona was so meaningful to people that they connected very deeply with it and connected very deeply with the image of Marilyn. So Marilyn was human, but she was also, as a star, something larger than human and larger than life. And that's something that Warhol understood and made real in his artwork in a way that was really in touch with the pulse of American culture in his lifetime.